Okay, greetings from Geno. I'm Gary Rogers, and I'm been working with Geno for a number of years, and I'm joined today with or by Håvard Tajet. Håvard is leader of our research and development team within Geno and plays an instrumental role in managing the Norwegian Red breeding program as well as directing the research that goes on with the Norwegian Red. We're excited to share with you today the most recent information we have on our genomic program, the accuracy of our genomic breeding values, as well as how well our Norwegian Red sires are performing, and a little bit of information on how much improvement we're making in our Norwegian Red population. Before we go too far, it's important, I think, to set the stage with the definition of genetic evaluations. Genetic evaluations can be published in different ways, in different forms. They're all estimated, of course. And the two primary types of genetic evaluations that are published are estimated breeding values or predicted transmitting abilities. And predicted transmitting abilities are just one half of estimated breeding values. In Norway, on the Norwegian Red, we publish estimated breeding values, but we take it one step further than some other countries, and we standardize these breeding values to a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 12. So pretty much all of our breeding values that you see that are published in official form would be standardized to this mean and standard deviation. Accuracy is defined as the correlation between the estimated breeding value and the true breeding value. And of course, we can get the true breeding value when we have thousands of offspring. We know pretty well what an animal's breeding value is once they start getting many offspring. Reliability that you hear a lot about, a lot of times reliabilities are published along with proofs, but reliability is nothing but accuracy times accuracy, or accuracy squared. So accuracy and reliability are connected in that way. There's one other term related to genetic evaluations that you don't hear much about, but it's also important. It's what we call bias. And you have bias in estimated breeding values or predicted transmitting abilities when the early predictions either overestimate or underestimate the true breeding values or the true transmitting abilities. And we do see some bias in estimated breeding values or PTAs for GS sires in, I should say, at least many countries, especially for the top GS sires, and especially those programs that use two-step approaches to calculate these genetic evaluations on genomic sires. The Norwegian Red breeding program is built on a high selection intensity, very good accuracy, and short generation interval. And this all results in, has been resulting in very rapid genetic progress in the Norwegian Red population. I'm going to ask Håvard if he would make some comments about the selection scheme within the Norwegian Red and how we implement that currently in the Norwegian Red population.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, and I think this is really interesting to see how the selection pipeline is for the two genders. We have 200,000 cows in Norway, Norwegian Red cows, and we get, if we ignore the sexed semen, which is starting to come, but for the moment this has been the case, 100,000 bull calves and 100,000 heifer calves. And then for the bull calves, we genotype 8,000 of those, but they're not randomly selected 8,000. First we rank the 10,000 born bull calves, and then we on their mid-parent mean, and then we genotype the 8,000 best ones. And when we get the results, we select roughly 150 of those into our young bull station, where we rear them up to about 1 year, and then they are finally selected as elite sires. And all in all, it's a little less than 50, roughly 45 elite sires per year. And I think that when we compare different breeding companies or organizations around the world, the fact that we genotype as much as 8,000 bull calves seems to be quite powerful. It gives us a really strong selection intensity. On the female side, we have 100,000 born heifer calves, obviously, and we genotype roughly 12,000 of those when they're very young. And same system here, they are pre-selected. We select, when genotyping results comes, the best 120 ones into our embryo test station, not test station, but production station, and there they produce roughly 3,000 embryos now. And then again, the calves can be recruited as bulls or heifers again. So we think this is quite a powerful selection scheme, and it has given us really good results.
Yeah, Håvard, I think it's probably unmatched almost certainly within the red dairy cattle populations in terms of selection intensity. 45 elite sires chosen from 8,000 of the top pedigreed young bull calves. That's pretty phenomenal. It's really proven to be an effective way to improve Norwegian Red. Speaking of that, I guess next we talk a little bit about genetic trend in Norwegian Red. First off, in Norway, we have what we call TMI, which stands for Total Merit Index. And this TMI is similar to PLI or Net Merit or BPI or EBI, depending on what country or population you're working with. But it's essentially a total merit index that's designed for the Norwegian Red population and the Norwegian Red economic circumstances. And over the past, or I should say, since we fully implemented genomic selection in around 2016, we've more than doubled the genetic rate of genetic gain in TMI. And so, Håvard, would you like to comment a little bit more about that and tell us a little more about what we're doing from a genetic improvement standpoint?
Yes, it's quite an acceleration we have experienced, and the first kind of step was when we introduced a pre-selection of young testables. We were still in the progeny testing, and we started doing pre-selection of the testables based on the first version of our genomic breeding values. And this improved the quality of these testables. But then in 2016, we did the full transition to genomic selection, the single-step methodology, where we utilize all information in one analysis, as far as we know, the best possible way of utilizing data. And then since then, we have never looked at proven bulls since, and we've speeded things up tremendously. And you can see still acceleration after this transition. And this is obviously because the more genotypes we get into a reference population, the more accurate we work and the higher the response we get. So step by step, we have kind of done improvements. We have improved the genotyping pipeline. We've done all kinds of small fine-tuning. And also in this time, we have accelerated the embryo program to where it is today. So we are really pleased with this, and we are a bit interested to see where we will end. Will it continue to accelerate a little bit more, or are we starting to stabilize? But we think we can chase this a little bit stronger. We can still improve generation interval slightly harder. We can still work on the selection, the embryo system. We can still fine-tune things with our models. So it's always room for improvements, but we think we are really starting to stabilize this at a very, very high level.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that genomic selection has essentially revolutionized the improvement within Norwegian Red. Even though we were making a lot of genetic change when we had our progeny test program, it's just been a huge success within the Norwegian Red breeding program. Håvard mentioned a couple of things that are, I think, important and that kind of underpin the success of this genomic selection breeding program. And one of the reasons why we've been so successful is that we have a population structure that's quite balanced because all sires are used across many herds, with almost all cows in Norway included as part of the recording program. We also have excellent data recording and data quality, and that's important, of course, for getting accurate estimated breeding values. And then he mentioned the single step methodology that we use for genetic evaluation. We know from a theoretical standpoint and also from an empirical standpoint where we tested it that this single step method is superior to two-step methods used by many other populations, especially when it comes to bias, but also perhaps when it comes to accuracy. But likely the biggest reason we've had this rapid increase and genetic trend, Håvard, is because we just increased the number of genotyped animals in the population, so we have better estimates. We started with about 20,000, well, a little less than 20,000 genotyped animals in 2016 and 17, and genomic selection workforce at that point, but it's clearly working even better now. And we currently have over 220,000 genotyped animals in the genetic evaluation procedure. So that really has kind of helped increase the accuracy of our breeding values, which we'll talk about next. The accuracy of the Norwegian Red genomic breeding values has increased rather substantially since we started the full genomic selection in 2016 and then on into 2017. Even at that point, we had accuracies that ranged 0.65 up to 0.8. But now the accuracies on all of our key traits are 0.8 or better, and most of them are approaching 0.9 in terms of accuracy. And of course, that's outstanding in terms of accuracy, and really it compares well with the accuracies in any other population, whether they be red cows or Holsteins or whatever. I think it's probably important, Håvard, for me to note here at this point that it's always important when you see a measure of accuracy or reliability to understand that those are always approximate. In our case here, we're providing accuracies that are calculated empirically, in other words, based on the resulting data that we have available. So there's there's still caveat that these things could be a little bit higher or slightly lower, but they are exactly what the data tells us. So we have a lot of confidence in the accuracy numbers that we're sharing with you here. It's interesting also to compare the current accuracy of our genomic breeding values with accuracy of daughter-based proofs when you prior to having genomic information, especially for those people listening today to our presentation who were involved in the breeding programs in the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s. They'll recognize that our breeding programs and our genetic improvement programs were all based on progeny testing programs. And most populations and breeds had progeny testing programs where first crop progeny testing was done on bulls where they'd get anywhere from 75 to maybe perhaps slightly over 100 daughters in their first crop progeny test. And we didn't have genomic data, of course, at that point either. So the accuracy of those first crop progeny tests is illustrated in the second column in this slide, and you can compare that to the accuracy of our current genomic breeding values within the Norwegian Red, and see that the genomic breeding values have accuracies that are very close to what we would have had for accuracies in our progeny test bulls before we had prior to genomics. And in cases where we had traits that have low heritability, like fertility traits, illustrated here by number of services in cows, you can see that the accuracy of our current genomic breeding values for Norwegian Red sires is higher than you would expected the accuracy to be for a progeny tested bull with 80 daughters. Now, the right column is accuracy for breeding values for daughter-proven bulls when they have more than 200 daughters. When in Norway, prior to genomic testing, we actually had larger progeny groups than any other population in the first crop progeny groups, I should say. And so we had a little bit higher accuracies in that. But nevertheless, you can see that the accuracy of our genomic breeding values and the current situation in Norwegian Red is comparable to the accuracy of daughter-based proofs when those proofs were based on a low to moderate number of daughters. In this graphic, we compare using milk yield in kilograms as the example trait, but we compare essentially the breeding values for based on 1,000 daughters or more in the vertical column with their genomic breeding values on the horizontal axis, I should say, before they had any daughter data. And you can see that the genomic breeding values did an outstanding job of predicting where the bulls would land once they got lots of daughters in their proof. And actually the accuracy for this trait, the most recent accuracy, is above 0.85. So you expect this line drawn through here to be close to the dots. The dots represent individual sires. And you can clearly see that our genomic breeding values did an outstanding job of predicting where the breeding values ended up for this most recent group of bulls. In fact, the largest decline we had of any bull from their from their genomic breeding value to their daughter-based breeding value was 208 kilograms of milk. And we had one bull that increased 258 kilograms of milk, you can see there. But generally speaking, most of them were within 100 kilograms of what we had predicted. And if you looked at a graph like this, say 20 years ago, comparing proofs from first crop daughter groups with proofs from second crop daughter groups, where you went from say 80 to maybe thousands of daughters, the graphic would look very similar to this. We would have seen lots of bulls and populations that changed by 100 to 200 kilograms after adding second crop daughters. So our current accuracies for our genomic breeding values are in line with the accuracies that we might have had 20 years ago for daughter-based proofs. The other thing you'll see is that on average, we have just as many bulls that go down slightly as go up. So there's no indication of bias in these breeding values. And as I indicated earlier, that's not necessarily the case for some traits in many of our populations around the world, where especially when you look at the very highest bulls based on their genomic breeding values, you might get a tendency for them to drop on average more than you would see, more than bulls close to the average, for example. So we feel very confident in our breeding values, our genomic breeding values for Norwegian Red sires, and we believe that this the illustration with the breeding values for milk yield should boost the confidence that any user might have in our estimated breeding values as well. So I guess the other comment I'd like to make is that we're making such rapid genetic changes, as Håvard indicated there earlier, especially for production traits and some other key traits, that 3 or 4 years of genetic change that you'd lose out on if you use daughter-proven bulls is more than compensated for by the improvement or more than compensated by the genetic trend. Even for those bulls that decrease the most, they'll still be better than most of the daughter-proven bulls that might be available that were actually genomic bulls 3 or 4 years in advance of that. So, like I said, we have a lot of confidence in our genomic breeding values at this point. So to summarize what we have to say, Norwegian Red population is making very rapid genetic progress, and it's really due to the very large and efficient breeding program that we've been able to put together, now based fully on genomics, and that's been the case since 2016, of course, but really in the last 2-3 years, we've been making tremendous progress within the Norwegian Red population. Our Norwegian Red genomic breeding values have very good accuracy and essentially no bias. Of course, some genomic breeding values will go up and some will go down, but the changes will be small. And essentially, the accuracies for our current Norwegian Red genomic sires will be similar to accuracies of breeding values based on small to moderate daughter groups where there's no genomic information included like we would have had, say, 20 years ago. Breeding values for these Norwegian Red genomic sires that go down will still be higher than the breeding values for older daughter-proven sires due to our rapid genetic progress in the population. So we're encouraging our customers to strongly consider the use of genomic sires if they haven't already used them in their herds. Because you will have better sires and the accuracy is outstanding on those genomic sires. And in addition, customers should be confident in the breeding values for these Norwegian Red genomic sires. And so, again, we encourage you to consider them in your breeding program.